The sky was still, almost unnaturally calm, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Dawn had not yet fully broken, and the horizon glowed faintly with a pale, uncertain light. In that fragile quiet, young men sat in silence, their thoughts louder than any engine that would soon roar to life. They were sons, brothers, friends. Ordinary lives paused at the edge of something irreversible. Each of them had arrived here by a path shaped not only by duty, but by a tide of history that had grown too powerful to resist. The origins of their mission did not begin in the cockpit, nor even on the airfields where they now waited. It began much earlier, as the war stretched on and hope began to thin. Resources dwindled, victories turned uncertain, and the weight of inevitability pressed heavily on those in command. Faced with overwhelming opposition and diminishing means, a desperate idea emerged, one that asked not just for service but for sacrifice in its most final form. What had once been unthinkable slowly transformed into strategy. The men chosen for these missions were often very young, many barely old enough to have lived beyond the quiet dreams of youth. They were told that their actions would turn the tide, that their courage would protect their homeland, that their names would be remembered with honor. And yet, beneath the surface of these words, there lingered something unspoken, a quiet understanding of what was truly being asked of them. In the days leading up to their departure, rituals took on a profound weight. Letters were written carefully, every word chosen as if it might be the last. Some wrote to their parents, apologizing for leaving too soon. Others wrote to siblings, urging them to live full lives in their place. A few tried to sound brave, masking fear with loyalty, while others could not help but let their uncertainty bleed onto the page. There were moments of forced normalcy, shared meals, subdued laughter, small conversations that circled around anything but the truth. But even in those fleeting glimpses of camaraderie, the reality remained ever present. Each glance, each handshake, carried a quiet farewell. As the morning of departure arrived, the airfields became places of solemn preparation. Engines were checked, uniforms adjusted, and final instructions given. The mechanics worked with precision, but even they could not escape the gravity of the moment. These planes were not returning. The pilots approached their aircraft with steady steps, though their hearts may have trembled beneath the surface. Some paused briefly, looking out toward the distant sky, perhaps imagining a different future, one where they would fly not toward destruction, but toward home. But that future was no longer theirs to claim. The morning of the mission often arrived with a calm that felt almost out of place, the sky wide and open, the air still, as if the world itself had not yet recognized what was about to happen. And one by one, they stepped forward, each carrying their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own silent understanding of what lay ahead. And as they approached their aircraft, there was often a moment where everything seemed to pause, where time slowed just enough for them to feel it. The ground beneath them, the presence of others nearby, the reality of where they were standing, all of it becoming clearer, heavier, more real, because this was the last time they would experience it. Then they climbed in, and the moment passed, replaced by action, by sound, by the force of the engine coming to life. And as the noise filled the air, there was no space left for hesitation, no room for second thoughts, only movement, only the path ahead. And one by one they lifted into the sky, leaving behind everything they had ever known, rising into something that no longer represented freedom, but finality. At first, the flight itself was steady, almost peaceful in a way that felt distant from what it truly was. The ocean stretching endlessly below, the sky surrounding them, open and indifferent. And in that space, there was time to think, time to feel, time to confront everything that had been pushed aside. And it is in those moments that the story becomes something deeper, because beyond the mission, beyond the orders, there was still instinct, still the natural desire to live, still the quiet question that exists in every human being when faced with the end. Some may have held on to belief, repeating it in their minds as a way to steady themselves. Others may have drifted into memory, thinking of home, of people, of moments they would never experience again. And some may have simply felt the weight of it all without words, without clarity, just the understanding that this was happening, that it could not be undone, and that every second brought them closer to a point where there would be no more time left to think at all. Then the target appeared, distant at first, almost unreal, then slowly becoming clearer, more defined, until it was undeniable. And with that, the moment shifted, the calm of the flight replaced by the intensity of what was about to happen. Anti-aircraft fire rising to meet them, explosions breaking the sky, the sound of impact all around. And some planes were lost in that moment, their journeys ending before they could be completed, while others continued forward, moving through the chaos, through the danger, because there was no other direction left to go. In those final seconds, everything narrowed, the world reduced to a single point, a single action, a single ending, and whatever thoughts remained, whatever emotions still lingered, had to exist within that shrinking space, because time itself was running out. And then, in an instant, it was over. The impact, the silence that followed, the sudden absence of everything that had existed just moments before. For them, it ended there, completely, but for others, it did not. Because on the ships below, there were people who saw what was coming, who understood it in the final seconds, who lived through it and carried those moments with them long after the explosion had faded. Because survival does not erase what was experienced. It preserves it, holds on to it, turns it into memory that does not easily disappear. And beyond that, there were families waiting, hoping, holding on to the idea that somehow things might be different, that somehow there might be another outcome. And when the letters arrived, when the truth became unavoidable, the loss settled in quietly, deeply, in a way that could not be undone, because what had been taken was not just a life, but everything that life could have become. As time moved forward, the war came to an end. The mission stopped, but the story remained, carried through memory, through history, through the effort to understand something that does not have a simple explanation. Because this is not just a story about war, or strategy, or even sacrifice. It is a story about people placed in circumstances that push them beyond what most of us can truly imagine, and that is what makes it so difficult and so important to reflect on. Because when we look back on this, we are not just looking at the past, we are looking at a moment where humanity was tested in a way that forces us to think deeply about what it means to choose, what it means to follow, what it means to belong to something larger than ourselves, and where the line exists between duty and the value of a single life. And maybe that is where this story stays with us, not in the explosions, not in the strategy, but in the quiet moments, in the letters, in the hesitation that could not be spoken, in the understanding that behind every mission was a person who once had a future that looked entirely different. So as you reflect on their story, not as a distant piece of history, but as something deeply human, consider what it means, not just in the context of war, but in the context of how we value life, how we understand sacrifice, and how we remember those who were asked to give everything before they truly had the chance to live. And ask yourself this: when we tell stories like theirs, are we remembering them for what they were told to be, or for who they truly were? This is a short documentary told without bias, more so to acknowledge the brutality and casualties of war, fought from the speculative front lines from those who were there, because there is no denying, these servicemen, no matter what side of the spectrum, they were all young, they were all sons, they all had families, and they were all just called up for duty. Peace be with all servicemen of these wars. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and as I always say, stay grateful, stay humble.